Is Azeroth getting a revamp? This is a video, it's been recommended to me multiple times. Let's take a look at it.
Azeroth is the planet on which the vast majority of the Warcraft franchise takes place. Since WoW's initial release in 2004, it has had 2 continents added, along with a number of island archipelagos, and with the 2010 release of World of Warcraft Cataclysm, its original 2 continents, Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor, to which I will henceforth refer as the Old World, saw a redesign. This was done in order to allow flying across them, because prior to Kata, the Old World was made without the consideration for flying, and a lot of things were designed with ground movement in mind. They were able to tie this world revamp narratively by Deathwing's awakening. As he ruptured out from under the planet's crust, he flew across the continent.
I thought this was really cool, by the way. I thought them changing the world was awesome. It was just disappointing that you couldn't go back with like a Keeper of Time and see the world the way it once was. I think if they had that tech back in 2010, whenever this game came out, nobody would have complained.
Of Azeroth to herald his arrival and wreak havoc among the world population.
Yeah.
This happened 13 years ago.
Stop it.
With the release of World of Warcraft Classic, players were able to once again venture into the Old World, to a time before Deathwing's Rampage and World redesign, and as it turns out, people like the Old World. Cataclysm is generally considered as the decline of WoW, and while there were numerous factors as to why the decline happened, I'm willing to wager that one of them was the Old World revamp, in which they gutted a large number of iconic questlines in an attempt to streamline the leveling experience and funnel players into the endgame as soon as possible.
Which I do think is appealing to most people. I think that the New World leveling revamp was better than the Old World in terms of questing and playability. But I would also say that the Old World was good by the time all of the experience boosts and experience increases were added towards the end of Wrath of the Lich King. Like doing Wrath of the Lich King in, let's say like, you know, like whenever we did fresh Wrath of the Lich King on Sky Fury, I had a better experience leveling at that time than I had leveling at the beginning of Vanilla WoW. And also I had a better experience than whenever I was leveling in like retail WoW. I think it's actually the best is Old World quests with like some improvements, but at the same time, faster leveling in general. So you don't have to go back and forth for like different quests in different zones.
This was a mistake, and the popularity of Classic and its world is a testament to people's enjoyment of leveling.
Well, it's people's nostalgia. Like people had already played the game for like over 5 years at that point. They were nostalgic about these areas. So whenever you change these areas, people are going to be upset about it. It makes sense.
And exploring the world unhindered by the developer's desire to boot you out the door straight into the max level experience. This sentiment has led to a growing number of WoW players asking for a second Old World revamp. History tends to repeat itself lest we learn from it, and Blizzard have recently learned not only that people still love their old work, but that also they're no longer invincible, and that they have to give in to players' demands, which so far they have in Dragonflight.
World of Warcraft damage control. I don't see this as a bad thing. Like, what are they really saying? They're saying they're giving the players the things they want because players aren't happy? Seems good to me. Keep doing damage control.
So, if Blizzard are to be believed, if they are indeed in there giving players what they want arc, we can perhaps hope that an Old World revamp is within the realm of possibility. Rachel Vaught, WoW's senior game designer, recently made this tweet, to which people quickly flocked with pleas for an Old World
What did she
designer.
say?
Recently made this.
Opens up Eastern Kingdoms and DevTool. Okay, well, I mean, they did that back in BFA whenever they changed Arathi Highlands. So I'm not really going to freak out about this or anything like that. I hope that they do revamp it and they change stuff and make it more interesting. I would be totally fine with them revamping the Old World at this point. It would be okay.
Tweet, to which people quickly flocked with pleas for an Old World revamp, asking for Gilneas, for Quel'Thalas to fucking not have a loading screen when you enter, for a new Teldrassil, etc. So much so that she had to clarify that she makes quests, not terrain, and while we can safely assume that she was just talking about the human heritage armor quest.
Bro, I'm gonna be honest. Look at what we could have had. This is what the human heritage armor should have been. You see that right there? That's what we should have got. Now, this is nice. But this is the actual human heritage armor. Not whatever fucking bullshit this is. Makes me so mad.
Line coming in 10:07, she and by extension Blizzard are
Similar,
aware
though?
of people's
No.
overwhelming demand for an old world revamp. Let's run it back to my previous video for a second, where I talk about evergreen features. Evergreen features are basically additions to the game which are here to stay. Now, I believe that a good
Mythic
game
Plus,
model would
dragon
be a
riding,
prime
yeah.
example of an evergreen
Arena.
feature, because a good game model goes a long way. Everyone who plays the game interacts with it, and these two continents were the first to be introduced into WoW, so people have a lot of nostalgia for them. They were the basis upon which this game was built, and they deserve a lot of care and attention from Blizzard. I mean, the game is literally called World of Warcraft, so the world should be a big part of the gameplay experience.
I've heard that.
And speaking of gameplay experience, at the moment, a player's intended interaction with the old world, that is presumably leveling a character, is not that good. While Chromie...
I think, like, in general, you can't make the entire world of the game relevant. Because if you make the entire world of the game relevant, people are going to be completely overwhelmed by it. Now, I think that one game that does a decent job with, like, the middle ground with this is Lost Ark. Because Lost Ark has, like, skill point potions and vitality potions, etc. So, like, whenever you do something or you accomplish, like, something in your adventurer's journal or you do something similar to that, you're able to make a little bit of progress in this and, like, get a little bit more strength or, like, another skill point or something like that, which I think is great. These things are very, very good. However, I don't think this is something that WoW should do as well. I don't think they need to make the entire world relevant, but what I would like to see is, like, why is it that we can't do, like, the Arathi Highlands, or, yeah, like, the Arathi Highlands, like, the Warfront quests anymore whenever we're, like, higher level? There's no reason to not have that scale up. Really, like, there's no reason. And like, why not give, like, little events? Like, for example, why is it not the case that in Timeless Isle, during Mists of Pandaria time walking, everything in the Timeless Isle is scaled up to Dragonflight level? There's no reason. Why not just do that? Every mob has a scaler on it. Just scale it up.
Time serves as a good way to point a player toward what expansion they want to level in. It only works for people who are already familiar with Warcraft, people who know their stuff, the ones that as soon as they make a new character, they tick all the action bars, auto loot, throw heirlooms on, second screen, they got the most optimal, quickest way, route, guides, speedrun, power level, chauffeur.
Not true, they just buy a boost.
Engineer's chopper, you know. But what about new players? Well, the new player experience at the moment kinda sucks. In this video, Nixium goes into a lot of detail about why the new player experience
I've watched
sucks,
this,
but
I think.
TLDR, leveling is boring and unintuitive because, like I said, Blizzard are trying so hard to bypass the leveling experience and get you into the Dragon Isles as soon as possible, it leaves no room for a player to just explore the world. Learn it.
Well, the problem also is that there's so many things that like your character has to do. And because the game is so old, the skill cap for the game is extremely high. Like, there's so many different interactions between spells, like trinkets, enchants, like all of your different abilities, talents. And this has been made much better in Dragonflight, but it's still a very overwhelming experience getting into the game. I think that's the case with almost any MMO, however.
All at their own pace. Thanks to Cataclysm, questing is so streamlined that it feels like it serves a purely utilitarian purpose. A person in my comments has outlined something that I've also noticed while leveling an ult recently, that the balance during leveling is awful. A level 10 mage player is able to spawn into a dungeon, spam arcane blasts and completely annihilate everything as an example, and your character seems to get progressively weaker
This is the case with like scaling in a lot of holiday events as well. Yeah, the scaling for the game is literal dog shit.
as the levels increase. But if Blizzard were to remake the old world, they could perhaps take some lessons they learned in making the Dragon Isles, which leveling experience is very enjoyable.
I agree with that. I think that the Dragon Isles leveling is the best leveling experience Blizzard has ever made.
And do things like incentivize exploration, give people fun, unique items, make vendors with specific stuff so that the player actually travels through the world. Basically, if they remake the old world and undo the damage caused by Cataclysm, focusing on making it simple for new players, a lot of them might stick around to endgame and not get disoriented and confused by whatever's happening at the moment. I mean, right now, a new player starts in Exile's Reach, which is a good starting zone for new players. Then they get plopped into BFA, an expansion whose story happened 5 years ago now, and very little of it has to do with Dragonflight, into which they are then immediately placed. The stark contrast of Horde vs Alliance, Azerite Fever, Sylvanas, Bad, Jailer, N'Zoth, and then an expansion where the factions are suddenly besties, everyone working together, kinda chilling on vacation is like, what? This outlines...
I don't know why they don't just let you do Dragon Isles at the beginning and just make leveling way faster. Just give you more skills at the same time. If you want to get to endgame as fast as you can.
a bigger problem with not just the leveling and new player experience.
I think WoW is held back a lot because people are attached to the old way of doing things, and that's become a bad thing for the game. Because people are so attached to, you have to do X to get Y. Wait a second. Who decided that? That's the way it's always been. Okay, that doesn't mean it always has to be like that. And going back and reevaluating some of these like core functionalities in the game, I think would be very good for the game.
But with the game's
I've talked about this a lot with
which
raiding.
is both a blessing and a curse, because while it's good that this game that so many people like and play has been actively developed for like 19 years now, there has been so much stuff added, so many characters, places, plots, subplots, that to an outsider it might simply be overwhelming.
It is.
That's why, if an old world remake...
The game's massively overdeveloped. Like, there's too many mounts, too many pets, too many achievements, too many rewards, too many titles, too many, transmog pieces. It's just so massively overwhelming that a new player can never get into it without just completely going into sensory overload and catching on fire instantaneously.
Was to happen again, Blizzard would have to be careful and make it narratively consistent with the current state of the game and its story, because the narrative in the old world has been pretty much untouched since Kata.
I don't think they need to do any of this shit, personally. I think they need to just keep making new WoW expansions that are good like Dragonflight. People will keep playing them, and it will gradually grow in players, and then also make Classic Plus where you do this instead. Because I think Blizzard, like retail WoW, is a lost cause for getting that sense of like new player immersion back into the game. I don't think that's ever going to happen again. You have to do something totally fucking different and do that with classic WoW. That's what I think.
Give some examples.
A full
the
reset.
swirlies in Westfall that completely ruined the previously tranquil landscape. This fucking jetpack that you have to use to jump over the gap between the barrens. The Stone Rot Dam and subsequent soaking of Menethil Harbor, or more recent examples too, the Sword, maybe a resolution to the Warfronts, the game's best, most popular and well-liked feature, the 9.2.5 Lordaeron questline. Like, the old world is in a dire state right now. It's a mishmash of previous expansions and their features and some massive plot holes. It's like an old notebook that you keep writing in over the margins, putting in loose pages, stapling bits of paper, trying to keep it together, but what the old world needs is a new notebook.
The old world is like, if you play through the old world chronologically, you just play through it on your own, It's like watching The Witcher first season and thinking that it's all chronological. Like episode 1 and then episode 2 happens after episode 1. Like, that's how fucking confusing it would be. Literally no sense.
A clean, blank slate upon which the developers of Warcraft can write unconstrained. And in-game, there have already been some tiny tidbits and hints towards it. For example, after Shadowlands, there has been a narrative time skip of about 5 years or something like that, where the factions cooperated peacefully and the world was allowed to heal from its previous wounds. But so far, the only healing that we've seen the effect of is the Dragon Isles reawakening. But what about the rest of the world? What about...
The truth is, the cold hard truth is, that it's not worth Blizzard's development time to do this. Nobody is going to give a fuck if they do this. It does not matter. People care about the new content at max level. So unless you're adding new content at max level in these old zones, all of your effort is going to go into the garbage. Just like it did in Cataclysm.
About Gilneas. Now, to be fair, Steve Denuser has all but confirmed that something will be happening with Gilneas.
Of course they'll do something
Also,
with
the
it.
new Teldrassil seed, because the burning of Teldrassil was a good idea to begin with, but, I mean, think about it. Gilneans are now like second-order refugees. They had to flee Gilneas to Teldrassil and then to Stormwind.
Yep.
I think it's about time that something is done to address that. Now, say they do remake the old world. Would they remove the original quests, akin to what they've done in Cataclysm? Deprive players of the...
No, I don't think that they will, because they didn't do that with Theramore. In Theramore, you can go back and do all the old quests. All you have to do is talk with the Keeper of Time. So yeah, I don't see any purpose for deleting the old stuff. Just add a Keeper that can allow you to go to the old zone. It's that simple.
quests and storylines, that 2-year piece of WoW's history? Perhaps yes and perhaps no. Chromie time exists now. Players might be able to just select Cataclysm as their expansion and be instanced into the Cataclysm era Azeroth. You can already see previous versions of zones by talking to Zidormi, so maybe they could extend that to the whole of the Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor
they should
for
have
max
done that in
players
Cata.
looking to complete old zones. And you know what? Honestly, even if they couldn't do that, even if they were to just completely delete the old questlines and stories like they did in Cata, they could align that with Cata Classic, if that ever comes out. So if you want to experience Azeroth as Deathwing is messing it up, go play Classic. I do have one plea for Blizzard. If they decide on the revamp, I hope they do the one good thing that they did in Cataclysm, and by that I mean don't do anything to that thing. The music. Keep the old music. Music has a very powerful effect on people.
The music matters for sure. I don't think, like, if Cataclysm Classic comes out, I will absolutely play it, okay? And I will be excited to play it. But I would be more excited if they did Classic Plus. I would be substantially more excited. I think Cataclysm Classic is a very known entity. It is the safe option that is boring. Nobody cares about it. People are just going to go back and do the raids, then raid log, that's it. The only people that I think really give a shit about Cataclysm Classic are PvPers.
Able to conjure up nostalgia, bring back good memories, so I feel like the music should remain as it is, as it's always been, so that even if the brave new world which awaits us offers an entirely new landscape, we could at least remember that we're still in Azeroth. And I mean, it seems to me like Blizzard are somewhat mindful of music in Dragonflight. The new Uldaman dungeon has the old, Azeroth stock cave music 1 or something. The music in the Azure Span is a clear homage to Grizzly Hills music.
Absolutely.
And the music around the Titan facilities in Thaldraszus has the iconic musical motif from Storm Peaks interwoven, so I wouldn't really worry about that.
Well, I think that they realize that a lot of WoW is coasting on nostalgia. So why not just bring a fucking surfboard? Keep going.
But what about instances? Dungeons and raids which exist in the old world. I don't think they would want to throw all that into the Caverns of Time. Perhaps they could do what they did to Uldaman, where instead of changing, nay, ruining the old dungeons like they did with the Dead Mines, Wailing Caverns, Sunken Temple, etc. They can just make a new dungeon in place of the old one and maybe put an NPC next to it that transports you to the old version. Kind of a mix of Zidormi and Lotho's Riftwaker, the NPC that teleports you to the Molten Core, so that both the players wanting to run the theoretical new dungeons could do so during...
Well, just do what they did with Karazhan. Remember back in the day, Karazhan, if you went up to the top, you could start halfway through the dungeon? And like then they just changed that to be the Return to Karazhan entrance. Problem fucking solved. Just do the literal exact same thing.
Leveling, and the max level players wanting to run old instances for mounts and transmogs could do so from the same place. Also, capital cities. If the main item on Blizzard's agenda for this theoretical revamp would be incentivizing players to explore and use the whole of the World of Warcraft, they would need to give players a reason to go to capital cities other than just Stormwind and Orgrimmar, but at the same time avoid making it into a chore. This is where they could take some lessons from Classic, where the capital cities play a much larger part of the leveling experience. Like, I don't know about you, but whenever I level a character in Classic and go to a capital city, it actually feels like me, an adventurer, going into a capital city to do all these things like work in my professions, learn talents, buy crafting materials off the auction house, deposit and withdraw things from a bank, hand in and pick up new quests, either...
I don't think you can get this in retail WoW again. I just think the game, there's just so much to the game now. It's so much different than it was. I don't think you can do that. Like, you need to do Classic Plus if you want to bring this back. Because I do think that there is a huge element of truth of what this guy is saying. 100% that, like, you go into the main city and it's like you've got a checklist of all the things that you want to do, and like the game feels like an actual adventure. Retail WoW is never going to have that again. That's not how the game... Bro, the game lost that in like Burning Crusade or Wrath. Like, and by Cataclysm, that shit was donezo. So it's never going to happen. You've got to do Classic Plus.
Breadcrumbs to a new zone, or quests which narratively require me to leave whatever zone I was in and venture into that capital city. This helps with immersion and world building, making the world feel much more alive and purposeful, and something that Blizzard could perhaps take into consideration when rethinking.
The reason why this would never work is that it's not logistically efficient to do that, to do those tasks. That's why people don't do crafting while leveling anymore, because they can level with the bad gear. And the time differential, do you want to spend an hour crafting a piece of gear? Or do you want to spend an hour leveling, and then after that hour leveling, you'll get the piece of gear that's better anyway, and you'll be at a higher level? It's just not, it's not logistically efficient. And if it's not logistically efficient, nobody is going to do it. Everybody metagames nowadays. Everybody, the first day, like, look at these things, right? Let's see. Elden Ring, builds, walkthrough, rune farm, trailer, randomizer. Like, the top three right here, metagaming. Absolutely fucking metagaming. World of Warcraft. Let's see. Well, nobody cares about the game in WoW, so that makes sense. Let's see another game. What other games should we try? Let's see. Final Fantasy 14. Final Fantasy 14 gameplay trailer, beginner's guide. I guess that's only one out of them, right? OSRS. Money making guide. Construction guide, thieving guide, agility guide, farming guide, slayer guide, fishing guide, Zul'Ra guide, Guardians of the Rift guide. Guess what? Let's look at Lost Ark. Gameplay, Reaper, Summoner, tier list, beginner's guide. Everybody wants to metagame. Path of Exile. Oh, there we go. Gameplay, beginner's guide, builds, 3.19, review, 3.20, classes, which build. Look at all of these. Metagaming is what people do. Whether you like it or not, that's it. So you can't have people go back to the main cities because it's not leveling efficient. Nobody's going to put that in the metagame leveling guide. That's just how it is.
Capital cities. While thinking about the old world revamp, I've asked myself the question, what about the rest of Azeroth? Northrend, Pandaria, Broken Isles, etc. And I've come to the conclusion that those zones don't really need a fundamental rework the way the old world does, because those zones and their respective expansions have been pretty much untouched since their introduction. They serve as time capsules to that particular time in WoW's history and weren't disturbed in the way that the
Except ICC, which is now just a massive fucking cuck shed after Bolvar took over. It's so pathetic.
old world has constantly had stuff put in, taken out, etc. And people haven't really been clamoring for a remake of those zones as much as they have for Kalimdor in the Eastern Kingdoms.
Oh, yeah.
Perhaps it's a discussion for another day. We don't even know if we'll get an old world remake at all, so let's not get ahead of ourselves. Speaking of getting ahead, dragon riding, this new feature added in the new expansion, is a completely new way to travel around the world of Warcraft.
It's
well,
good.
At least a part of it. I want to talk about dragon riding because its implementation meant that the 4 new zones added in Dragonflight had to facilitate this feature. Basically, the zones are really big and spacious, with loads of dramatic elevation changes,
Yeah, I think that the zones, everything about Dragonflight in terms of like its like design, like visually, I think is great. I unironically think it's great.
and other geographical wonders.
They look good, yes.
I'm mentioning this because people enjoy dragon riding very much. So
Yes,
much
they
so
do.
that many have asked for Blizzard to implement it worldwide. Problem is, the old world isn't really designed with dragon riding in mind. So it's a similar case of what I said earlier in the video with the Kata world revamp being made for regular flying, so could this new theoretical world revamp be made with dragon riding in mind. This would perhaps involve making some dramatic changes.
What do you mean? It's not made with dragon riding. What did Drakthir do in the old world? They do dragon riding. You just put it in the game. They don't need to revamp everything.
Changes to what the zones look like, which I wouldn't mind because the Blizzard art department have a nigh impeccable track record, and the Dragon Isles are a perfect example of what they're capable of making when unconstrained. The old world, specifically its zones, are quite small when compared to the Dragon Isles. They're quite packed with stuff, locations and quest lines, which can be seen even with regular flying, how if you're leveling in the old world with 310 flying speed, you're just zooming past everything, flying over whatever obstacle, natural or otherwise. It's cheating. It breaks up the pacing of whatever quest lines you're doing and gives no breathing room to absorb the world around you. So with dragon riding, it would be even faster and turn the old world into a complete blur. And sure, not everything has to be done on foot. Some things should be made easier or more convenient with flying, like in Classic, doing...
I very much dislike the line of thinking that flying is bad for the game. I totally disagree with that. I think flying is fucking awesome. And I don't like people that say flying is bad. Flying has some negative effects on some things, but overall, it is a good system.
The wetlands run as
yes.
a night elf, for example, is a goddamn chore, but there are moments during leveling when you're able to just soak it in and vibe with the atmosphere of the world. Dragonflight has been able to avoid the pitfall of speed leveling with regular flying because its questlines and world building are designed with you flying around in mind.
Well, it's also, you can speed level like crazy in Dragonflight. Like, you level really fast. I feel like Dragonflight's like one of the fastest expansions to level in besides like Warlords of Draenor.
Everything is much further apart and the terrain is created to navigate within, not above it, like in the old world, where you just glance over everything and fly through zones which change biome and climate like the flip of a switch, showing that despite flying being facilitated for in the old world, it was sort of forced into it without major forethought. Now if we're talking about a major redesign, perhaps merging some zones to give the new old world some breathing room would work. Here's an example that I spun up in Paint in like 2 minutes of how this hypothetical zone merger could maybe look across the Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now this is obviously just a quick idea of mine, but you could see how, if some liberties were taken, this new world building framework could be...
I can't imagine this being an efficient use of the development time. That's the concern that I have. It's like, in what world is this better than making new dungeons for in-game? Because, like, I don't think that, yes, there are new players that come into WoW, but the majority of people that are playing WoW are people that have already played WoW. Like, it's people that already were in the ecosystem, and you're just churning through them. You know, this guy hasn't played ever since, like, Mists of Pandaria. He's coming back to try Dragonflight. Like, how do you retain that person as a player? Well, it's not by changing Duratar. It's just not.
Applied to the old world. There are, however, two problems with them implementing dragon riding throughout the old world.
What's
number one? Players would be relegated to using 4 mounts, and okay, I know there's like a 5th unused model for one, but that's still kind of not a lot compared to how many mounts there are in game. And while
good point.
I'm aware that these dragon riding mounts have their models based on already existing models, how the fuck are you supposed to make this dragonfly, or this?
I actually think that people will use the old mounts all the time. Because dragon riding is work. And I will be honest, if I could use normal flying in the Dragon Isles, I would do it very regularly. Because I just go up, and then I tab out, and I press auto run, and I go all the way over to my destination, and then I tab back in, and I land, and I'm done. That's it. Yeah, I think that normal flying mounts still have a lot of value because of that.
The second issue, ground mounts. Would they be completely relegated into obscurity with the exception of a few zones and instance content? Would new players be allowed to use dragon riding from pretty much the get-go like you can in the Dragon Isles and risk being overwhelmed with this new hasty system of traversing the world? Or would they be introduced to it later and be forced to slowly run around these new spacious zones? Or perhaps Blizzard could compromise and make all the zones have their own tight, self-contained stories appropriate for ground travel, and once new players unlock dragon riding, they could then go back to these zones and rediscover things previously hidden from them.
I like that a lot. I think that's always really cool whenever you have like high-level quests and low-level zones.
Before you say that people don't care about world building that incentivizes exploration and has mysteries and stuff, Elden Ring won Game of the Year. People still want to get lost in a game world. Just because the vast majority of gamers nowadays want quick, instant gratification, doesn't mean that there aren't still some people who want an immersive experience. And we all know what happened when Blizzard tried to make WoW for a modern gaming audience. While on the subject of Dragonflight,
I think Elden Ring was successful for a lot of reasons. The exploration factor did matter, and I think it had a lot to do with it. But I also think that it was just a really, really good game. Like, the systems in the game, the way the game played, everything about the game was really, really good. The exploration, I think, was an option for people to take advantage of.
The rework wouldn't happen in this expansion. I'm no game designer, but it's obvious even to me that a project of this scale would take a long time. However, say it were to happen in the next expansion, there's already ways in which the current expansion and its lore would allow the rework to happen narratively, as opposed to Cataclysm, this time the face of Azeroth.
I've always been of the mindset that the narrative of the game is secondary to gameplay. I don't care about the lore or the narrative of the game if the lore or the narrative of the game is a rationalization for making it worse.
Azeroth would change not through cataclysmic events, but rather through nature healing itself and prospering thanks to the dragonflights retaking their charge as protectors of Azeroth, particularly the red dragonflight, who are seen as the givers of life. This has already been hinted at in the Take to the Sky cinematic, where Alex Straza can be seen spewing life into some barren wasteland. Also, the black dragonfly is a thing again, and they're like earth dragons, so maybe they could somehow reshape the world as repentance for the sins of their father. Dragonflight has been described as a foundation upon which this new chapter of WoW is built, and while we've only seen the very beginning of it as of making this video, Blizzard are already doing things for the game which will have a lasting impact on it. The aforementioned evergreen features, and one of those features is the profession rework. However, to an
There's also the talents. The talents have been great.
astute observant, it quickly becomes evident that one of those professions is missing: archaeology. Archaeology, introduced in Cataclysm,
It's because it was bad. It's a bad profession. It sucks. I mean, yeah, it's bad. Like, that's why they didn't do it.
and seemingly abandoned in Shadowlands, is the only profession which hasn't received a rework. But if their roadmap is to be believed, they do intend to rework it and bring it back into the fold, which makes sense seeing as there is like a whole faction whose sole purpose is to explore and catalog the Dragon Isles. So then
Oh yeah, archaeology as an idea profession is really cool. It's just the implementation of it is bad.
doing a bit of digging would be the next logical step. Anyways, the reason why I bring it up is because Blizzard could perhaps make this new archaeology a bigger part of the world revamp. They could maybe put in entire quest lines which involve digging up the history of Azeroth, or even put in little Easter
That
eggs
would be
to
really
previous
cool.
expansions or events. Another groundwork which the WoW team could perhaps implement into this old world revamp is player housing. In the interview with Hazelnutty, game director Ian Hazakostas said that player housing would be such a big undertaking that it would have to span the course of multiple expansions.
It's a big undertaking, and I think I would argue that if we were to do it, it would probably have to span multiple expansions.
And perhaps
Well, you better get started. Okay, all right, let's get started. Come on. Yep. All right. That sounds good. Well, it'll be ready in 5 years. Okay. Hopefully it'll be good by then.
old world which facilitates dragon flying would also have space enough to put in player housing at a later date. Now all these things, all these theories, ideas and wishes are all fine and well in the mind of the end user. Blizzard, just do this, put this in, fix this, change that, but behind everything in the World of Warcraft, there is a team of developers who work on this game. Human beings who have to type out the code, draw the art, sculpt the terrain, voice the characters and all that. All these monumental changes to WoW, while fun to theorize and ponder, require lots of manpower. Activision
That's why I think that they shouldn't really. I'm gonna be honest. I don't think that they should revamp Azeroth again. I don't think that is a good use of their resources. I was happy with them revamping like one zone every patch, like how they revamped like Duskwood, or not Duskwood, Darkshore, and then they also revamped Arathi Highlands. I thought that was cool. But doing the entire thing, it's just not necessary. I don't think that they need to do that. It's such a massive undertaking, and I think the actual people that will appreciate that and use the content is a lot smaller than you would imagine. I don't think it's that many people that are going to give a shit about it.
Blizzard have recently acquired Proletariat, swallowing their game studio into their multi-billion-dollar empire and relegating them exclusively to working on WoW. And while we can already see the effects of this additional staff with how quickly Blizzard are able to iterate on and make changes to Dragonflight, and how much content...
I think also the reason why they're able to make more content and iterate on Dragonflight is because, number one, they're not worried about having some weird fucking sexual predator prowling around the office that's going to touch them a little bit too often every single day. Number one, there's that. And number two, they're not trying to microbalance 7 different systems across 8 different game modes. Like, think about how complex it is to balance like conduits, covenants, legion legendaries, tier sets, trinkets, enchants, soul binds. This would be all your time. That's all you're doing is balancing these things, and you never get it right because it's just too complex. It's impossible.
they have planned ahead, it would be unwise to assume anything regarding an old world revamp. All that we know is that they were able to do it once before, and that they are aware of the players' demand for it. All that we as consumers can do is wait and see what unfolds in the future of the World of Warcraft.
Damn, this guy's a... I think this is a good video, especially for somebody who's just starting out on YouTube. I think this is great, man. Yeah, I'm going to link you guys the video. That way you guys can give him a like and give him a sub. He's only got 400 subscribers. This video did really well. A little bit of video making advice. You know, the text on the screen was very hard to read, and also it was not there long enough. But other than that, I think this is actually very well done, especially for somebody who just started out. Yeah, no new information. Well, it's not really new information. It's just a conversation about, like, is this really worth Blizzard doing it, etc. So yeah, release WoW 2, start new with a fresh story, make add-ons for it illegal, and that's it. I think that they need to do Classic Plus. Because I think that WoW with, like, super new graphics won't look as good as you think it will. And I would much rather them use the old graphics and go the OSRS route with World of Warcraft and add in more and more content like quest lines and stuff like that, similar to the Scepter of the Shifting Sands. I think that's what the real future of the game is beyond like the next 5 years. Like that's what can really retain people, because WoW is always going to have that nostalgia. It's going to have that nostalgia in 20 years. And how can you make a game that people are going to want to come back and play it 20 years later? You continuously develop it while making the overall feel for the game the same. And that's what I think. I can't take these low quality models anymore, personally. I don't think it's a big deal. Like, look at OSRS. I mean, Final Fantasy models aren't super good either. Like, there's very few MMOs with, like, super high fidelity graphics. So I don't think it's that big of a deal, man. Action combat, I think there are some abilities that should function as if they're action combat, but no, I don't think action combat should be the norm. Absolutely not. They should use the new profession system and make archaeology a subspecialization of mining. Yeah, maybe they should. It's just a design, not really graphics issue. Yeah, exactly. I don't think they should make WoW 2. Too many WoW players would be upset if they couldn't take their cosmetics of over 15 years over with them. Yes, I think that's why they need to do Classic Plus, because doing that would be a better solution. And that way people wouldn't feel like they're losing their cosmetics. Personally, as somebody who has like 1 million unobtainable mounts, etc., I would trade it all away for a WoW 2. Like, I mean, I would like to be able to go back and see all my old stuff if I wanted to play WoW 1 again. But I would be fine with that just being basically done with. Yeah, it'd be totally okay with me. What's classic WoW for you? Plus, Scarlet Crusade raid, being able to purify your corrupted Ashbringer, the vanilla version of the Dragon Isles, being able to go through the Dark Portal into another version of Outland. Let's see, what else? Karazhan Crypts, like going to Kultiris and sailing around in boats. Oh, fuck. Grim Batal, yep, absolutely. The raid under Mount Hyjal. Interact, I think Deathwing was up in Mount Hyjal and Vanilla WoW. Let's maybe have that again. That would be really cool. New battlegrounds. I think also like new raids with like new abilities, like more legendary items to farm. Yeah, all kinds of cool, like really long quest lines that give you cool stuff. Add back the Talisman of Binding Shard into Molten Core. Like just stuff like that. That's what I'd like to see. Basically everything they planned for vanilla but was cut. Yeah, I think that'd be a good start. And then go from there. Another opening of the gates. Maybe, I don't really think that stuff matters as much. I think it'd have to be something new. We already had the opening of the gates twice. Let's try something new now. That's my viewpoint.